Alright, so welcome to this new tutorial, and I promise it's going to be a little easier than the last one, at least for me, because the last one was a big pain in the ass. This tutorial is what happens after we've camera tracked, so we've extrapolated the camera movement that we had in the day, and now we have it as a 3D camera in our scene. Now, once you're done with that, we can just jump right into Blender. Oh yeah, no, I forgot, the last tutorial was totally not about that. The last tutorial was about how to download the ship, but that's like 2 minutes. So we're now in Blender. And we have this. This is our scene, and you can see the plane is stuck to the floor, more or less, and everything moves according to the camera. Now, before we even bring the ship in, I'm just gonna come right over here because I want this to be very visible. Once you hit over here in motion tracking, once you hit setup tracking scene, Blender automatically configures a couple of things for you. For example, if you open a new scene in Blender, not even gonna bother saving, and you come over here to compositing, you don't see anything. But if you open up this scene over here and you come over to compositing, now you have a bunch of things. And the same thing over here. Now you have two collections called foreground and background, and a collection is exactly what you're thinking it is. It's a grouping of objects. For example, this, as you can see, when I select it, it lights up right over here. In the foreground, I have my light, I have my cube, and I have my camera. And as you can see, when I select one object over here on my outliner, it selects the same object on the viewport as well. Over here on the background, I have this plane, and this plane is called ground. Collections are relatively simple to understand, okay? So I can have this object be in several different collections, and I can do all sorts of things with them. What isn't so intuitive is this thing that we have up here. We have this background and foreground over here, and these are called view layers, and these are another level of control that Blender has over the way that the scene is set up. For you to understand better how these work, I'm just gonna come over to this icon right here. Under restriction toggles, I'm gonna enable this one called holdout, and this one called indirect only, and you're going to see that they appear right here. I have two collections, foreground and background. Notice it's very important, they are with lowercase, they're written with a lowercase. These collections contain different things. So on my foreground, I have obviously my cube. This is the main object, so to speak. First of all, very important, everything that I do here, you need to be in cycles for it to work. Once you're in cycles, if you can use GPU, please use GPU over here on device. And under film, I need to set it to transparent. Now it's gonna work, and I'm just gonna hit F12, and Blender's gonna render everything for me. Now what can we see? If I look over here, I can see obviously the cube is stuck to the street. Very nice. If I come over to composite, composite is the result of all of these processes that are being done to the image. But if I look right over here to my render result, I have my foreground. My foreground is just the cube. You'll notice it's just the cube with the shading. You don't see the background image, and you don't see the shadow. If I come over to foreground, you only see the cube's shadow, but you don't see the cube. If I come over to composite, you have everything. And these are the view layers. So the background is only the shadow. I'm in the view layer background. And in the view layer background, the foreground collection, so all of these things right here, including the camera, the cube, and the light, but it does mainly applies to the cube, is set to be indirect only, meaning these objects won't be directly rendered in the background view layer. What's going to be rendered is only their indirect effects on other objects. For instance, the shadows that they cast. And this object here, called ground, if I come over to object properties, remembering I need to be on cycles for that to work, if I come over to object properties, under visibility, this is set as a shadow catcher. And a shadow catcher does exactly what you think it does. It catches the shadows that are being projected onto it. So I have here a collection of objects that cannot appear, but that produce indirect effects, like for instance shadows, and I have here an object that does nothing but catch those shadows. And if I come over to the foreground collection, here the background is set as holdout, and the foreground is set as normal, is active and set as normal. For me to explain what holdout means, I'm just gonna bring this cube down, and I'm gonna hit F12 again. And this is very interesting. See, wherever this ground object is in front of the cube doesn't get rendered. Of course, in the final scene, I would just come over to edit mode and extrude on the x-axis. I'm gonna bring it down. This isn't perfect because the track is never 100% perfect, but also because the street isn't perfectly even. So you just do this, And yeah, why? Whatever. I'm just gonna pretend that this is working fine. I did do another version. It was a bit better, but it wasn't better enough that I would re-record the whole thing. Now, if I hit F12, you'll see that the cube only renders above the ground, which is what we want. So, and then it composites everything in nicely. This is what a holdout does. That's why we set the floor this way, because that's how floors behave. You don't see anything that's underneath it. But you could also use a holdout for something like these pillars here. I'm gonna come on with the ground selected on under viewport display right here. I'm gonna set it as wire. Then I can only see this as a wireframe. I'm gonna change it later when I'm configuring the shadow, but for now it does the trick. I'm actually gonna just select the camera and just ever so slightly rotate it so that it's working a bit better, but I'm gonna have to just doing a slight adjustment to the track. It isn't very precise, but who cares. These trackers are right here. I'm just gonna try to level them a bit. Let me see if I effed it up. It's okay. It's okay. No one will notice or care. But for instance, I could use a shadow catcher on this car if I wanted to put something behind the car. If I wanted the cube to be right over here, I could create an object that sort of looks like this car. I have the tracker markers here to help me, so I can, just kind of see where the car is and line everything up. I could create a holdout object and set this object to be a holdout. I can also set the object to be a holdout right here. Then the object is a holdout independently of the collection. I could do that if I so wanted. Anyway, this is our scene configured, and this is how view layers work. So if I come over here to compositing, and for that to work, I need to have, I'm just going to bring this down ever so slightly and render again, because I like to have the holdout effect so that you guys can see what's going on. For this, I need to, on Edit Preferences Add-ons, I need to have Node Wrangler enabled. If this isn't enabled, please do. And on compositing, you can see that over here, the bottom of everything, I have my foreground layer. And if I Control Shift click, you'll see the foreground. Here I have the background, which is just a shadow. And here I have the movie clip. And then I do a bunch of processing to it and I apply everything. This is how the compositing works. And this is also set up by Blender. That's the reason why we have everything separate, because then I can do adjustments to only the cube. I'm just gonna add, for instance, Shift A to add curves effect, and just gonna make it really red, but I can have it affect only the cube and nothing else. So this is why we work this way. Now I'm gonna come over here, I can just delete this cube, and I'll come over to File, Append. In the folder for my previous tutorial, I'm just going to select the spaceship, double click, and on Object, I'm gonna choose the spaceship, and now we can position it. I'm just gonna rotate it 180 degrees on the Z-axis, and I can now use the median point for that. It's fine. I'm just gonna bring the spaceship up a bit. Maybe it's too far back. I want to have it touching the ground. For this, it's useful if this isn't set as wire, so I'm just gonna have it as solid. And over here, I'm gonna enable cavities so that it's really easy to see if the spaceship is above or just with the spaceship selected. Just gonna bring it upwards, because I don't want the spaceship to intersect the ground. So now I'm going to select this, and using the 3D cursor as a pivoting point, I'm just going to rotate the spaceship down so that it lines up. And if I look through my camera view and I again set this as a wire, I can see my spaceship is quite nicely positioned. I can just maybe select the spaceship, and with G, Shift Z, I can move the spaceship without it moving on the Z axis. And this is a lot of fun. Now the spaceship is quite well stuck to the ground. I'm gonna bring the spaceship over because there's water here. I don't want to deal with these reflections. And this is working quite nicely. Is the spaceship intersecting the ground? I'm just gonna have to figure it out now. It's important to keep an eye out for that kind of stuff. It might be floating a little bit. I'm just gonna just ever so slightly bring it down and set this as wire again. Now the movement looks better. This is how you put the spaceship into your scene, and because we deleted the animation, it's going to behave well. In the next tutorial, I'm going to teach you guys all about UV unwrapping the spaceship and setting up the materials so that the spaceship actually looks good. Alright? See you on next tutorials. Bye.